and welcome to episode number 107 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam.
I'm Sahil.
And we have been very, very busy this past week. So busy, in fact, that we are breaking up this episode into two episodes. There's just too much to talk about for one episode. Interviewing two teams, talking about two whole sets of things. So this episode, a little later on, we have Daniel coming on to talk about his team finally for the first time in a long time. This is his first appearance on the episode in how long? Let's see. 90, if I'm doing my math right, 94 episodes.
What was that, episode 13 he was on, though?
He was on episode 13, so 94 episodes. Definitely the biggest gap between appearances we've ever had. It's a good interview. We've already recorded it. We've also, of course, had our draft, but we're not going to talk about the draft today or anything that happened during or after because we have so much that happened just before the draft to talk about.
Yes, no, major plot twist. That we're not going to be talking about the draft immediately after the draft, but don't worry, we will have a draft episode coming afterwards. But we wanted to set the stage for the draft. We thought it would be weird to do the draft episode and then talk about a bunch of stuff that happened before the draft. So we are going to talk mostly trades here. And it's interesting how this works out. Every trade that happened before the draft, or basically every trade, was a trade of mine. And then every trade that happened during the draft, or in the case of one of these trades, like an hour before the draft, did not involve me. So after I made, I think it was like 11 straight trades, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 straight trades. There have now been 8 trades that have not involved me, including one that broke as we were about to record, thanks to some peer pressure we put on Ruthvik. So you'll hear a lot about my team this episode. I always look forward to that. So do we want to get started off with the first trade, Cam?
Yeah, let's do it. Is this God, I don't even know where these start. Is this the three-team deal?
With the third 3-team deal I've made this offseason.
Yeah, 3-team deals are back. I don't know what's the deal with these deals, but they're back. Ever since we said, hey, there's only been one real 3-team deal. We said that in episode 100. Ever since then, we've had a lot of legit ones.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, so December 28th was our first 3-team deal of the offseason. There's been 4 more since, including, believe it or not, the first 3-team deal that did not involve me. We now have 10 total, and the first 9 involved me. 5 of those 3-team deals occurred between the start of the league, so like March 2018, and December 2022. And then from December 28th to now, not even a month, we've had the same number of 3-team trades. And they're not little 3-team trades either. These have all been 3-team trades with like very significant pieces involved, like at the level of that first 3-team trade. And honestly, you could argue, especially in the case of one that we're not going to talk about today, like has exceeded that in terms of the sheer impact. So, but anyways, let's dive in here to this first 3-team trade. I acquired Zach Gallen from Andrew and Gavin Lux from the Bellies. Andrew got Chris Bassett from me, and Tony Gonsolin, the 3rd overall pick in Jake's 2024 first from the Bellies, and the Bellies got George Springer and Ahmed Rosario from me. Cam, do you want to go first, since I will have a lot to say?
Yeah, so I think Andrew's the clear winner of this deal. I think it's an interesting one. You did fine. Zach Gallen's a great get, obviously. I like him a lot. I don't like it a ton for the Bellies. I'm not super high on Ahmed Rosario. George Springer, I've never loved. He's a fine get, but I'm not sure He's been up and down since leaving Houston. But yeah, Andrew, I like Bassett a lot. He's a little older though. Tony Gonsolin, I'm a little worried about. But that 2023 first from the Bellies, that very well could be the number one pick in the next year's draft. And then another first as well. I think.
Well, so the 2023 first was the third overall pick in this draft.
That was the third overall pick in this year's draft.
That was
Gotcha.
a pick that Andrew used that pick on Termar Johnson to give some context.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, that's a good pick.
Great pick.
Yeah. I think Andrew got the best end of the deal. The Bellies, it's a bit of a win now move for them. I'm not sure I love the pieces. And then you can talk about what it means for your team.
Yeah, sure. So I'll give some context behind the deal. I thought my roster was set before this deal, and I wasn't really looking to make another move. The Bellies kept insisting that they really wanted George Springer, and eventually those talks spread to Ahmed Rosario. They offered me Springer and Rosario for Gonsolin 3 in the 2024 first. So basically the package that Andrew got. And I told him from a value perspective, it was interesting, but I wasn't too interested in Gonsolin. And, I'm a win now team, so I didn't really need the pick. So I was like, hey, let me shop that package around to another team and see if we can make a 3-team trade. So I sent a couple offers out. Christian Javier was one of them. I'm sure Anthony remembers that. I think there was a couple bats I threw out offers for. I made the offer to Andrew, offered Gonsolin 3 in the first. When Andrew saw it, he thought that he confirmed this to me afterwards, and I'm a little annoyed by this, but good for Andrew. He thought that 3 was a third-round pick, so he rejected it. And then I immediately threw in Bassett. He immediately realized what I actually meant and was like, let me think about this. So he takes a day, comes back to me. He's like, yeah, I'll do this. So I maybe didn't have to give up Bassett, but I've made it no secret that I'm willing to pay up for guys that I think are elite talents that I think could be cornerstones on my team. I think Zach Gallen's a top 20 dynasty starting pitcher. He's only 27. I expect him to be on my team for the years to come. I have no problem, ponying up. Springer's 33, a little bit injury prone. I do have some depth in the outfield. I acquired Seiya Suzuki this offseason. I got Taylor Ward in a later trade. So I felt comfortable with giving him up. In Rosario, I think you're right. I don't think he's anything special. I think he's a decent accumulator. I don't think there's a high ceiling. And honestly, I thought Gavin Lux had a higher ceiling. And I'm not going to go into my whole rant about him because I ended up trading him away. But I think he could be a pretty big post-type sleeper this year. So I really like that from my perspective. I do agree with you that Andrew is the biggest winner. I think he got a lot of value from Gallen, even though I share your concerns with Gonsolin. And with Bassett's age, as well as moving to Toronto, which and one thing that wasn't a consideration when the trade was made was that they moved their fences in even more. So I wonder if that ERA is going to go up relative to last year with the Mets, where it's a pretty good ballpark to pitch in. But I still think it was really good value for Gallen.
Yeah, I think so. I think Gallen. It's really hard to get we've talked about this all the time. It's really hard to get a 27-year-old starting pitcher in this league.
Yes, very hard. You have to overpay a little bit and just accept that you're going to do that. And I feel like I may have did that, but hey, I traded away a bunch of older guys or guys I didn't think had a high ceiling, so it worked out in the end.
Yeah, moving on, guys, you traded Cade Marlowe and Mason Hour to the Tendies for Jeffrey Springs and my 2023 third, which was pick number, what number was that in the draft? That was pick number 35. You took it to take Max Wagner. He's a Baltimore guy. What do you think of this deal? I know there's been some Cade Marlowe discussion in the chat.
Yeah, Marlowe and Auer are both guys that I think are interesting prospects. They've both been seeing some hype. Marlowe in particular just like had a dominant year in the minors. last year. Let's see if I can pull up the exact numbers. But he had 20 homers and 36 stolen bases, but he did it as a 25-year-old in Double A, with a 26% K rate. So I don't know if there's really a major league bat there. I think maybe more of a fourth outfield type than like a some guy I'm gonna miss. I see Mason Hour rise up some boards as well. I think he's an interesting prospect, but the reality is these are both guys that I picked up this offseason. You know what I do. I pick up guys, I trade them away. Hour are still 48 bases this year as a side note. That's insane. And he did it with 15 homers. So maybe there's a little more star power in there with him. But Jeffrey Springs had a pretty decent year. He kind of came out of nowhere. You know, the Rays did their magic. He had a 2.46 ERA, 3.04 FIP, very solid K rate, walk rate, homer per nine. He did in 135 and a third innings, but I don't really see a reason why. You know, he's not one of their young pitchers that got a baby. You know, I think they have every incentive just to let him kind of do his thing and soak up some innings. And I think and he's only 30, so I think as someone who's in the back of my rotation, I think it's a pretty decent fit. And it didn't really cost much. And Wagner is a Orioles prospect that had a pretty solid year his senior year. We'll talk about him more in the draft episode. So out of Clemson, so happy to have him, and I like this trade for me overall. And from Alex's perspective, I don't really think Springs is going to do much for a team that's not really contending this year. So nice to get the prospects.
I mean, these are prospects he could have picked up off free agency at any time. These are prospects who are free agent tier prospects. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been free agents during the offseason. Sure, Hour's interesting. I don't care about Marlowe at all. And you told me a stat the other day. How many players, prospects, and major leaguers have you picked up this offseason that you have thus flipped for another piece?
16 between the majors and the minors.
You've done this 16 times. Teams are still falling for it. Teams are not. We thought last offseason, I think teams stopped falling for it, but I guess that has is no longer the case. You're still getting away with it. Teams don't really know what replacement level means in this league.
Hey, there's some good guys that traded away, so there's always a plan behind it. And all these guys might end up being good. You never know.
I don't know. But either way, I mean, there are a lot of guys who are free agents who might end up good. But they're free agents because they don't have value now.
That is fair.
But yeah, I really like Jeffrey Springs peripherals. I'm not sure how many innings he's going to throw this year, but yeah, those peripherals are really strong.
Yeah, I mean, I think that rotation weirdly is pretty set. Like when I think of Tampa, I usually think of set rotations, but like McClanahan, Glasnow, Drew Rasmussen, Jeffrey Springs, and Zach Eflin, I think is going to be their 1 through 5. So we'll see.
Yeah. Moving on though to the next trade. This was another one made by you. What a surprise. This was a 3-team deal.
Oh yeah. You got, fourth one this season.
Taylor Ward, and a second. The Bellies. This is another one of the Bellies. Bellies got Charlie Morton and Jose Abreu, and Yuki got Trey Mancini and Connor Norby. Another interesting one. The Bellies are getting older this offseason, at least the past few weeks. And Jose Abreu is a guy I'm pretty high on, and I know Daniel. I don't want to talk too much about this one because we talk about it in the next segment. But yeah, we all like Jose Abreu a lot. Connor Norby is a good get for Yuki. Trey Mancini, I'm not really sure how to value him for this coming year. I don't know. I'm not high on Taylor Ward. You can probably talk for an hour about Taylor Ward. But yeah, what do you think about this deal?
Yeah, we talked about this a lot in the next segment, so I won't go too deep in. The Bellies are getting older. I do think Abreu was a couple more solid years. There are a couple signs of decline this year. Some metrics I was reading, but I think in Houston with the Crawford boxes, I think the homer numbers will come back up, and the Statcast page is bright red. I'm going to sell you on Taylor Ward though. That's what I'm really here for. Came out blazing this season. And, he had a short IL since the beginning of the year, April 16th to May 20th, 481 OBP, 9 home runs. Fantastic. Why do I say May 20th? May 20th, he left with a shoulder and neck injury. And, shoulder and neck injuries can really, affect a player's performance. And that happened with Ward. He was shit for 2 months. August 1st, as he's starting to get farther away from that shoulder and neck injury to the end of the season, 288, 346, 481 slash line with 10 homers, 8% walk rate, and a 16.9% K rate. Finished the season at a 281, 360, 473 with 23 home runs. Even if you're taking that OBP that he ended the season with 360 and drop it down to the 346 he had from August to the end of the season in a 237 plate appearance sample, that's a very above average outfielder. I'll take a 345 OBP with 23, 25 home runs with a few chip in steals any day of the week. He's only 29. I don't think this is a fluke because the Statcast page was and a lot of the metrics seem to back this up. It was a bit of a gamble giving up Connor Norby. I really like Connor Norby. I think there are some solid things in his future. I do worry that maybe he was a little pop-uppy because, which is a great phrase, by the way, because he wasn't really viewed this way earlier in the season for the Orioles. So I wonder if maybe there's going to be some correction here. But I'm really high on Taylor Ward, and I see no reason why, he can't put up a very solid season next year. And Angels lineup, that's a lot better than the one he batted in last year. So
That's true. I guess the lineup's better. I think he's an interesting guy to buy in on, I suppose. We'll see. You have a lot. Your outfield's kind of weird. There are a lot of guys that I'm a lot less high on than you are. Your outfield has the potential to be kind of mediocre this year. I know you don't see it that way.
I think it does. Look, Yelich, Castellanos, Ward, Suzuki, there's a lot of variability in how they can perform. Tatis too, once he gets the outfield eligibility. The only two that I really feel comfortable predicting what they're going to do next year are Soto, or not Soto, you have Soto, Betts and Mullins. I've taken a few dart throws there in the outfield and think I have enough depth there where, I'm hoping a good chunk of them, work out. And if not, I'll adjust to make trades. And one of the reasons I'm not too worried about my outfield comes from the next trade that I made. This was not a 3-team trade finally. I agreed to trade Gavin Lux, Sonny Gray, Jake Fraley, Ruth Vic's 2027 third, and the next 2024 third that I acquired to EBO for Ha-Seong Kim, Colton Cowser, Matt Mervis, and Zach Geloff. Cam, do you want to start here or should
I? Yeah, this is an interesting one. A lot of moving pieces. I'm tempted to say that Colton Cowser is the best player in the deal. Gavin Lux, obviously he's got the prospect pedigree. We'll see what he does when he has a more stable lineup spot this year. Sonny Gray I've always liked. It's interesting. The one thing I find interesting is Sonny Gray and Colton Cowser. Those were both guys in the discussions in your big Trey Turner deal. So it's interesting to see them take Sonny Gray. You getting Cowser back. I think Ha-Seong Kim's interesting. I think he's a better real life player than a fantasy player. Matt Mervis is someone I'm sure we're going to talk a lot about later this episode.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a lot of pieces who are just kind of okay. I'm not really comfortable calling anyone the winner, but I'm not sure why EBO is trading away three highly regarded prospects for like Sonny Gray and stuff.
Yeah, I didn't get the Sonny Gray and Jake Fraley part. Fraley was somebody I'd picked up a couple days prior. I do think there's a lot of
Yeah.
upside, which you disagree with, or maybe not a lot, but I think he could be an interesting player. He's still relatively young, I think 27, 28. Sonny Gray is someone they just always really liked. Like they insisted on him in the Trey Turner deal. I got him back this offseason for starter depth. And then once I acquired a couple guys, Gallen, McCullers, Springs, he kind of became less important and became a little expendable. Um, uh, Lux is the only player in this deal I'm really kind of torn up about. And honestly, this is the second time I thought I was done trading, but then they kind of came back with this. EBO's logic for making this trade was basically they had a prospect logjam and they wanted to start consolidating some of that value into major league assets. And from that perspective, Gavin Lux is not, the worst player to gamble on. He had some high OPSs this year in different stretches. I think he had the 11th highest OPS between June 1st and August 22nd. And I say August 22nd because he got hurt. He came back off the IL in September, was garbage after that. But despite the high OPSs, it hasn't really translated into what I call fantasy goodness. So there's not a lot of homers, there's not a lot of stolen bases, both in the single digits. And he was batting lower in that Dodger lineup. I think you're right. If he bats higher, there could be some upside. From my perspective, I really like Hauser. I really did not want to give him up in that Turner deal. I, kept insisting, hey, let's find a way for you to go get him. I got him. I think he's a top 20 prospect right now. I think he'll be up for the Orioles this year, and I think he can definitely factor into my outfield mix. Especially if one of the outfielders above him struggles, or knowing me, I just keep wheeling and dealing. Matt Mervis was someone I was really interested in this deal. He dominated last year. He's a really cool story, actually. If you all haven't heard like why he signed with the Cubs, he basically made spreadsheets of each teams, organizations who was interested in him because he was undrafted in the 2020 draft. There was only 5 rounds. And he was trying to figure out who is the best combination of opportunity at first base, but also good job at player development. And he settled on the Cubs. Clearly worked for him this year. There's a lot of hype that he was going to get the first base or DH job coming out of spring training, and then they signed Mancini and Hosmer. I'm not really concerned about them blocking him long term, or honestly even in the short term. But he's definitely the epitome of a pop-up prospect. And Geloff was someone I drafted last year who I like. So I thought this was an interesting group of players, like you said, but I think I was happy to kind of add more to the farm. I think EBO is happy to add more to the major league roster. And it just, from a roster construction perspective, I think this fit both of our needs.
Yeah, I think Mervis, there are just so many guys who are 24 that hit the ball really well in AAA. And Josh Van Meter is always my go-to comparison, and he sucked in the majors. And most of these guys never turn out to be anything, and I don't expect Matt Mervis to be any different.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, on the flip side, look at what Vinny P and
but Vinny P was a top 50 prospect for a little while.
Yeah, I mean,
Vinny P had pedigree. Matt Mervis just came from nowhere.
Vinny P came out of nowhere last year and then had the pedigree and then popped off this year as well and kept it up. If Mervis keeps it up for half a season this year in AAA, there's no difference between him and Vinny P other than the fact he's a year older. Maybe
Vinny P was appearing on prospect lists lower down in the minors is my point.
Fair. And I guess Vinny P's numbers were a little bit better than Mervis's were. I don't know if Mervis is going to come up and just like absolutely just dominate. I think there's a major league future for him. But I think you're right. I don't know if it's like absolute stud or anything like that. Speaking of Matt Mervis more, we'll get there in a second. But Ha-Sung Kim was involved in a trade the day after I acquired him. I traded Ha-Sung Kim to the Bellies for Charlie Morton. Charlie Morton had the 10th most strikeouts last season and really rebounded in the second half of the season. He still wasn't pitching deep into games. I mean, he's still 39. There wasn't a ton of upside, but I thought at the back of my rotation, like to replace Sonny Gray, I was like fine, and everything you said about Kim is true. Like, I think he's probably a better real life player. Like, I don't think there's a ton to say about this trade, other than the fact that Morton was someone I eventually traded later. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's about it. Next trade in that case, you traded Matt Mervis to Eric for his 2023 first. That was the pick number 10, which eventually was
Chase
DeLauder for EBO. I mean, Mervis feels like an Eric player, absolutely. I think it's ridiculous that you're able to get a first rounder for him.
No, as soon as I acquired Mervis, my first thought was like, I'm gonna trade him to Eric. And I chatted Eric and I was like, any interest in Mervis? Is like he feels like a U player because of the reason I just said. He feels like a Vinny P. He feels like a Jose Miranda. Eric really finds these pop-up prospects. He becomes interested in them. Lars Nootbaar comes to mind. And it makes sense. Eric was telling me Mervis was on his like watch list for a while, and he was annoyed that he didn't add him. And now he got him. So we'll see how it works. I mean,
I think we need to talk about the difference between a pop-up prospect who's 21 in AA versus a pop-up prospect who's 24 in AAA.
Okay, sure, but like it's still an Eric type of player. I mean, Lars Nootbaar is like 25 this year and kind of popped up out of nowhere. Like, that's just an Eric type of player. I don't know how.
I know. I'm saying there's just a different value scale for these guys.
No, I agree, and that's why I was ecstatic to get 10 off of him. Just seemed like a lot, especially with it's not like last year's class, which wasn't super deep. Granted, the 10th overall pick last year was Colton Cowser. This all comes full circle, I promise. Yeah, I just it's a deep draft, and there was a lot of guys who I thought would be available at 10 that I like better than Mervis. So not to mention he's a first base only prospect, and the threshold for being a good first base only prospect is a lot higher than the threshold of the bat at other positions. So I thought it was interesting. Eric also did have 3 other top 13 picks. So it wasn't like he traded away his only first round pick. So I get how that, value's kind of mitigated or not value mitigated, but that's, kind of mitigates the, maybe impact that it has, for his team. But I don't know. This could really work out for Eric, or it's really going to flop. I don't think there's a middle ground here.
I think, yeah, you're probably right. I don't like it, but that's okay.
Speaking of the 10th overall pick, that got traded too. It's amazing how all these players I acquire and then just like trade away immediately, right?
It's ridiculous. And this we're about to talk about this next trade. I said after this trade, it's like you're just trading the same 4 players over and over again. It's like, what is happening? Why? What are you doing? This is like OOTP for you. How can there be this many trades to make among the same 4 players? It's like, I'm expecting there's an Eddie Rosario trade just around the corner, I'm sure.
I wouldn't be surprised. So
what is going on?
I think I sent the facts out after the trade. So this is now the second Jose Suarez deal I've been involved in this offseason, the second Jorge Polanco deal since the trade deadline. Seth Brown has now been on my roster, has had 2 different stints on my roster in 2023. And my favorite is that this is the 3rd Charlie Morton deal in 2023 alone. In fact, it's the third Charlie Morton trade in a week span. So yeah, a lot of Charlie Morton moving around.
I'm I'm gonna double down on that analogy. You're just playing OTP here with real people. It's like you're the owner in OTP. The you're you playing OTP and you're just making a bunch of trades trying to trade the same player over and over again because the other team will give you a second rounder every time.
Yeah,
Or give you $50,000 every time.
I do a
And
lot of that. Yep.
yeah, just trying to find weird loopholes in OTP to like get infinite cash or infinite prospects, and
Mm-hmm.
you're doing that in real life.
Yes. Yes,
And you're
that is
it's
exactly.
like and it's like like the loophole in OTP where you draft a guy in the Rule 5 draft and then who's got prospect potential, and then you trade him for some guy who's like on paper a little bit worse, but you don't have to Rule 5, you don't have to stash him on your major league roster. So the opponent sees, hey, this is a win because I get the better player, but you see it as a win because you're like, hey, I'm giving away a guy I got for free for someone who has value to my team. And this is what you're doing when you pick up a guy off free agency and trade him the next day.
Yeah, I think you summed it up nicely. Nice job. That's pretty much what happened here. It- I acquired all Morton Brown the first, like all within that past week. I was like, let's package them together nicely and let's ship them out. Jorge Polanco, if you all recall the episode we did right after the bar exam. Oh my God, that was like right after the bar exam was when I acquired Jorge Polanco. I still remember in between sessions of the bar exam, sitting in my car and not having my phone because they wouldn't, let me take my phone in the building, and I didn't want to leave it in a hot car. But I had a notebook with me, and I wrote out the trade in that notebook. That notebook is still sitting somewhere in my apartment, I think. And I compare what my roster would look like before and after the trade. Um, and I'm sure the roster looks radically different now, given the number of trades I make. But and now I've been able to get him back. He was necessary to trade in the Trey Turner deal that kind of worked out because he ended the season hurt. This one's admittedly a bit of a risk because he did end the season with a knee injury. He didn't have as great of a year as he did in 2021. But what I will say is, I think a lot of the underlying metrics were similar. I do think a bounce back is coming. Carlos Correa came back. That's really big for that lineup. I'm still pretty high on him. And I'm really curious to see how he does this year. And for me, as a win now team, while it would have been nice to have used a first round pick this year, it's I'd rather take the guaranteed production plus kind of your concept of free money. That first round pick felt like free money because it was really just Matt Mervis, who I didn't view as a central part of a trade. So that kind of worked out nicely. From EBO's perspective, nice to get the first round pick. I was kind of surprised they wanted a 39-year-old Morton. Seth Brown is interesting, 25 homers, 11 steals last year, but he has trouble getting on base. But I think he's a really nice sleeper pick, and they did need some outfielders. And Jose Suarez had a really nice second half of the season. There was a little bit of a velocity bump, some pitch mix changes I've read about, and I think he could be interesting. And if not, I'll cut him, but I'd rather gamble on a 25-year-old starting pitcher than a 39-year-old starting pitcher. So,
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. No, Jose Suarez. I mean, would you say that Charlie Morton is above the Suarez line? I would say he is. Which begs the question: is Jose Suarez above the Suarez line? And the answer is maybe.
so here's what I'll say about both of them. With respect to Morton, anybody who finished a top 10 in strikeouts in the majors is definitely above the Suarez line. Do I think he's going to keep it up? Not necessarily, but he should be rostered somewhere. Maybe not on EBO's roster. I don't know if he makes a ton of sense, but on a competing team's roster, yes. Suarez, when you dig into the second half and the reasons behind it, when I did a closer look after the first time I traded him, I became a little more interested in him. And I think he's probably better than I had viewed him initially when I thought he was at the Suarez line. But, this isn't. He's still someone who, if he has a couple bad starts to start the season, maybe I just kind of cut him and just cut my losses. It's not a long-term piece, but I think there is potential for him to blossom into a solid back of the rotation starter for my fantasy team.
I mean, yeah, that's what the Suarez line is. Everyone thinks that for a little bit, and then they decide he's not. He doesn't quite fit on the roster. But maybe this time is different.
Or on the flip side, in a week, I'll get bored of him and I'll decide to flip him and get like a legitimate starting pitcher, because that's how.
Yeah, that's right. Probably, probably likely also.
Yeah, probably.
But that's okay. So those were your trades. I think we can talk about the next one or two, or at least the next one before cutting it off here.
Let's just do the next one, because the next one happened before the draft, but it involved draft picks. The one after that started at the draft.
Gotcha. And that one's got a good story, but this is the final pick before the draft. Some more shifting around here. EBO sent Ruthvik's 2023 first. That is pick number 6. They sent that pick to Yuki. Yes, for Shea Langeliers and Yuki's 2023 first. So essentially, Yuki ended up taking Cam Collier. And then Yuki's pick was
Brock Porter.
Brock Porter, who we'll talk about that next episode. But that's a reach at 8.
I agree.
It would have been an even bigger reach at 6.
Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have taken him at 6 though.
They probably wouldn't, right?
No. Well, I'll do some explaining here.
Or we can. Why don't you do the explaining now?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, there's two things here. Like, one, I don't really understand. If this trade had happened like 3 months ago, 4 months ago, sure, I think this makes a bit more sense. You really don't know how the draft is going to play out, right? And you also, at that time, Zane and Sully did not have a long-term catcher. As we know, earlier this month, they acquired Alejandro Kirk. Alejandro Kirk might have some flaws, but he is a very solid fantasy catcher. There was no reason they necessarily needed to go out and get a second catcher at this point. So to move down a couple picks for a player they didn't need, question me. The timing too, why are you doing this right before the draft when hey, we're going to see what these picks are in a second. Maybe you might reach a point where the players that are left at 6, there's just one guy that you really want, and he's not going to be there at 8, and it's not worth giving up Langeliers for. Or it's not worth getting Langeliers for. You're at the point where you could actually properly value what that trade is, as opposed to talking about hypotheticals with what the players are, based on what picks are there. Or based on what pick you have. So I didn't really understand that. EBO was going to take Brooks Lee if they kept the 6th overall pick. Zane was talking to me about that. They had Brooks Lee on their individual boards. One of him and Sully had him 2nd. The other had him 3rd on their board. And if they would have just stuck at 6, they would have gotten Brooks Lee. Or if Brooks Lee was gone in the first 5 picks, and after those first 5 picks, they were like, we really don't want that pick, they could have just traded it down then. They could have traded 6 for 8 and Langeliers at that point. So I really don't understand this from the one, them having Kirk, and 2, why not just wait half an hour and see how the draft plays out? But
Yeah, there's a lot to discuss there. First and foremost, I like Brooks Lee a lot. I would never ever have him at number 2 on my board. Yeah, second of all, from EBO's perspective, they essentially traded Brooks Lee for Brock Porter and Shea Langeliers. I don't like that deal for them in that case. Langeliers is he strikes out a lot, and he's more of a glove guy. He's going to get a shot as the everyday catcher for the next couple years in Oakland, but I'm not convinced he's a super. He's beyond a catching streamer, at least now. Yeah, I think this worked out kind of badly.
no, and I think it's a huge win for Yuki. Yuki was able to trade up and get Cam Collier. And we'll talk more about Collier in the next episode. I don't want to get too deep into him here, but I thought that was a very nice pick at 6. I had him at a similar level as Brooks Lee, or similar ranking. So I think Yuki came out a big winner here. And obviously he doesn't need Langeliers because he has 50 million catchers. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Yuki did really well. Yeah, I had Collier and the other guy we were just talking about. Collier and Lee were kind of back to back on my board. I was very torn between them. I had Collier 5 and Lee 6, but I could have gone either way on them.
Yeah, same. I had them like 5 and 6 in my rankings as well. I think I Collier higher. Or maybe they're 6 and 7. I might have had Kodai Senga above both of them, but that more for the trade value than anything else.
Right. Yeah. But anyway, those were all the pre-draft trades. Anything else you want to mention here before we get into our interview?
No, I don't think so. There is a lot to unpack next episode, so we're gonna have a lot of fun with that. But no, nothing else this episode.
Yeah, it's funny. We've talked a lot this episode about how great next episode is going to be. So I hope you haven't turned it off just yet. But yeah, because we've got a great interview coming up. We've got Daniel on. Like I said, it's been 94 episodes since we've had him on. It's a great interview, a lot to talk about, and we will see you on the other side.
Focus first, then you're forced to go wild, yo. Something more than anyone could think of me. Do what you want, I'm still gonna live my destiny. I've got one chance to live my life, and as long as I'm alive, Hey yo, prosperity and danger. So many.
All right, we are back now with Daniel on the show for the first time in a very long time, co-owner of the team now known as Drury of Your Peers. How are you doing today, Daniel?
I'm wonderful, and I like having that name said out loud. It's nice to move forward that way.
Yeah, no, it's a nice name, especially I'm sure the lawyer of this podcast likes it a lot too.
Yeah, I was just about to say I really like that. That's I like the lawyer theme here.
It's still got the Chris Flexen picture as the team logo. Not sure if that's going to change anytime soon, but
I don't think it is.
All right. Well, I love it. It's a great name. The name change signifies, and you were telling us a little bit about this off air. Does this signify any sort of move away from Cody Bellinger in your future?
Absolutely. I think I've made it no secret that I won't have Cubs players actually play for my team. So everyone knows where to come find a bargain outfielder. That's probably all I got to say on that.
No, definitely. He's an interesting one. I mean, I don't think anybody saw his career going down the path that it has. But who knows? I mean, he's still only 27. You know, he's been an MVP before, just as recently as 2019, which feels like forever ago. But you know, there's maybe a new new home means he could bounce back, but that could certainly be an interesting upside play. And I know quite a few teams here are looking for an outfielder, so we shall see if a market develops there. But you may not have traded him away yet, but boy, you have been part of a lot of big trades recently. You have been part of, was it three team trades just in this calendar year, which is just absolutely insane to me. But we wanted to break down those trades and get kind of your thoughts on them. I know Cam and I talked about this first one on the last episode, but we'd love to hear your thoughts on it. You traded me Alexis Diaz. EBO got Alejandro Kirk from you and a third round pick from me. But then you got Hunter Renfroe in a third from me, and Brian De La Cruz, Henry Davis, and Andrew's 2023 first round pick from EBO, which was the 5th overall pick. We'll talk about what happened with that pick later. You traded it away, but walk us through your thoughts on that deal.
Yeah, honestly, I really like Kirk. I love what he did. He's a guy I liked, like he was a waiver addition free agent for me. So I always felt like a special allegiance to him. However, I'm just concerned about his long-term eligibility at catcher. I think even with Endy Rodriguez in the Pirates system, there's plenty of room for Henry Davis to come up and perform, especially with his defensive outlook. So I really like that piece. I think Logan O'Hoppe is going to be a day one contributor for us and the Angels. So it wasn't too hard to part with Kirk himself. And I guess going into the return, obviously that pick was top 5 pick in the draft. So definitely a place we saw we could either get value via trade or otherwise. So we jumped at the opportunity to get the pick. I already talked about Davis, and honestly, De La Cruz. People don't realize it, but he's 90th percent or above in xWOBA, BA, and slug. 86 percentile hard hit. I'm obviously just reading off of his StatCast dots, but at the same time, that was kind of like the driving factor that we think, even for a guy who has such little experience, even at 26. He was pretty successful with numbers to back it up. So I liked him as a kind of cherry on top.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's a good breakout candidate on top of Henry Davis being a good prospect and that potential lottery pick from Andrew there. You've made a lot of 3-team trades. What's the next one here? The Zach Gallen one?
Yep. So this is the biggest one. I got Zach Gallen from Andrew, and Gavin Lux from you all. Andrew got Chris Bassett from me, and he got Tony Gonsolin, the 3rd overall pick, and Jake's 2024 first from you. And you got George Springer and Ahmed Rosario from me. So obviously 2 very big hitter additions. Talk about that trade.
Yeah, I definitely think there might have been an overpay there. Andrew definitely came away, I think, the best in that deal. But honestly, for what we were giving up, I kind of wanted to sell both Gonsolin and Lux for a little while. Like, I think everyone kind of knows the sentiment around Gonsolin. Forearm injury, wrong side of 30, not amazing peripherals, phenomenal like ground ball and strand luck as well. So I think everyone was kind of able to see that. He still performed phenomenally, even with like tough peripherals. So there was definitely value there. In the draft picks, honestly, I felt like 2 firsts for the return we were getting was pretty solid. I like Rosario a lot. I like that lineup a lot. And similar goes for Springer. Like, we needed greater OBP production from the outfield, someone to kind of balance out Canna with some of the lower off guys like Renfroe and Oscar Gonzalez. So I pulled the trigger there.
No, definitely. I thought that was a really great trade. Very solid pieces that you got in Springer and Rosario. I think they've been remarkably consistent over the past couple of years in their production, and I think it was a huge boost to your offense. And I think everything you said about Gonsolin very true as well. Forearm injuries for pitchers are very scary, so not something you want to mess with. So yeah, no, I think this is one that worked out for everyone, and I was glad to see that we were able to get a second 3-team trade in there. But wait, if you weren't done with the second 3-team trade, we had another 3-team trade. I got Taylor Ward and a second-round pick from you. That second-round pick actually went to Cam. Hi, Cam.
Hi.
You all got Charlie Morton from me and Jose Abreu from Yuki, and Yuki got Trey Mancini and Connor Norby from me. I know you've been pining out after Jose Abreu for a while during the offseason. I know that I was in talks with you to get Jose or for you to get Jose Abreu when I had him. Talk about your thoughts on this trade.
Yeah, I thought trading Ward was kind of from like a position of strength and needed to fill in a position of need. I like what he did last year. I don't love it as much as others did. I think he's a phenomenal StatCast performer as well. But I'm just curious. I'm curious to see kind of if the power sticks. It's he made some significant changes, and I'll be curious to see if they stick around, but I was okay to move on from him just as a position of strength, as I said. And I love Abreu. Obviously there's a little bias there, former hometown guy. So I wanted him, needed a first baseman, thought that was a pretty good price for the production. Yeah, and Morton was a nice add-on who kind of ended up getting us Kim, which I was fine with. So yeah, just kind of trading from something we had a little bit of in outfield, decent hitting outfielders. So we wanted to make an addition in the corners.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely am still high on Jose Abreu despite the age going into this coming year.
Yeah, he'll ball out in Houston.
I know. Imagine what he's going to be able to do when he is like the fourth best hitter on his team, as opposed to like the only.
Oh God, yeah, with that protected line, if he still had 93rd percentile exit velocity, yeah, he's going to feast in those Crawford boxes.
Yeah, I really like him in Houston. I like him at that park. I like him for our team not having a first baseman really prior to him. Kind of follows the trend of the Dela Cruz acquisition and what we're trying to do.
No, absolutely. But speaking of first baseman, you did acquire another first baseman yesterday. You got Ty France from Ruthvik for the 5th overall pick during the draft. Ruthvik used that pick on Kodai Senga. What were your thoughts on that trade? What made you want to pull the trigger there? I do remember you all kind of quickly discussing this as the draft was going on.
Yeah, it was honestly like the type of player we thought we could get in that spot. Our debate really came down to after Green went. It was between Senga, Collier, Lee. We weren't thinking Porter or Neto. And we were debating Yoshida as well. I actually really wanted Kevin Pareda, which was why I wanted to trade into that end of the first round. But I wasn't going to draft him with 5. So I kind of did the math that like what Senga would bring to my team this year. Like I honestly don't love drafting those international guys right off the top. Because I mean, if they're going like round 1, pick 5, like the contribution is going to be fine. At least that's the expectation. And I feel like I could have gotten the same value out of Senga as I could like picking up, I don't know, Wainwright or Herman Marquez. So again, just trying to trade. We like our prospect, so didn't want to have to like create a prospect crunch necessarily if we didn't have to. So I thought France, again, trading to a position and categories of need, especially with power and OBP, kind of was as our two biggest lacking pieces. Yeah, I like France a lot. Young guy in his prime who kind of broke out last year. Like not amazing peripherals, but certainly nothing that really indicated him getting overly lucky. And I like that lineup ever more at Safeco. So I'm hoping that he could kind of build on last year with some other pieces in the lineup.
Yeah, no, for sure. He's a solid bat. But I believe that was all the individual deals we had to talk about, unless I'm wrong. But one thing I wanted to bring up, last year you had 2 saves the entire year. This year you've definitely made a push to have that not be the case. You have Jorge Lopez now. You acquired Ryan Helsley. You acquired and then traded away Alexis Diaz. How do you feel about your bullpen going into this season? Do you think that's something that could help you win a few more games this year?
Yeah, I mean, we're still looking potentially to upgrade our bullpen. But at the same time, like a lot of, I feel like just looking even at last year, like a lot of the main, I guess, kind of the unsung heroes of relievers were guys that were picked up. And obviously the Edwin Diaz's, the Liam Hendricks's, Clase, Hader, like they'll all be drafted. But I mean, looking like outside the top 10, I don't think like just looking at 2022 performance, I don't think people had Kenley Jansen necessarily as the second place guy in saves. The 31 saves out of Taylor Rogers, I don't think people necessarily anticipated that. And then similar guys, Scott Barlow, Camilo Duvall, both performed really well. Paul Sewald kind of came out of nowhere. Same with Clay Holmes, Robertson as well. Tanner Scott, like I guess Robertson started the year last year with the Cubs, but I mean, there's just a lot of movement with relievers, and I think we're just going to be more diligent about making sure we parse the waiver wire well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Helsley's a guy who I think can be a top 5 closer this year. He's a guy you won't have to worry about unless things break really badly. I don't think you're going to have to worry about him losing his job or getting replaced or anything like that. So he's a very good guy to have.
Yeah, you are very welcome for him. But yeah, Cam, do you have any other questions?
I guess just in general, how do you view your team going into this coming year? Do you view yourself as still in the middle of the rebuild? Do you think you can make a sneaky push for a 6th seed? What do you expect out of your team this year? And do you think there's still more work to do?
Yeah, I definitely think there's more to be done. I mean, I think I think we're at the tail end of the rebuild, but definitely looking for some production out of our farm system pretty quickly to start the year. I mean, it looks like Oscar Colas, Amaya, maybe Eguy, Luis Ortiz, Waldichuk, O'Hop, and Muller will all start in the big leagues. So definitely going to be paying attention to that. And then the other piece of that is that I think we're much improved. So even though we're still going to be reliant and leverage the farm, I think our major league roster is significantly better than it was at the end of last year. Definitely going to be reliant on some resurgent pitching. We didn't really get anything out of Severino, May, or Turnbull last year, so we like to view those as acquisitions in and of themselves. hoping to have more depth as well, especially going down to relievers. So hopefully, again, good execution on the waiver wire will help us get there. And like I said, I think we're much improved. I think we have like pretty decent caliber guys at basically every position, which I don't think we could have said last year. So yeah, I certainly like the position we're in and would love to make a run at a 6 seed.
Yeah, I think definitely some of the pieces you have, and especially if you add on to them, you could make that argument, make that play. I don't think that's something we would have said going into this past year.
Yeah, certainly not.
Yeah, no, definitely love some of the acquisitions, love the activity. As someone who makes a ton of trades, it's been fun seeing someone else make a ton of interesting moves this offseason, and excited to see how your season plays out. It'll be a good one.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for trading with me and hopefully upgrading my team a little bit.
Anytime. I'm always here if you want to make more trades. So
I don't doubt that.
Absolutely. All right, Cam, anything else here before we wrap up?
No, that's it. Any final words, Daniel, before we call it an episode?
Always appreciate being active enough to earn a spot here. It's always a humbling opportunity. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and it was nice catching up with the draft last night.
Oh,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, we've talked, about your team being one of the less active teams throughout the league, but you this offseason, with the exception of Sahil, have been the most active team, and it's refreshing, but it's also a lot of fun to see you guys make a lot of moves, and a lot of them I've really liked.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and hopefully they bear fruit. And my next appearance will be talking a different tone.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hopefully next time we're talking to you, it's because you're in the playoffs. So
that would be cool. I doubt it, but that would be great.
yeah, playoff upset of Cam. That'd be my dream.
Yeah, that'd be something.
That we have you on here.
We very nearly got that from Yuki last year.
Yeah, we definitely nearly got that from Yuki. My God. But yeah, no, thanks for coming on. We'll definitely get you on another episode soon, and I think that's gonna wrap Cam and I up. We'll see you all next week when we talk about the draft.
Thanks so much, guys. See ya.
All I wanted was a nice change, no games, crazy kind of spark. All I wanted was a good guy, no time for shooting in the dark. I was looking for a home run, good enough to win over this heart, and you hit it out of the park. And now I won't stay up all night fighting closed eyes looking into
This podcast is good.